I've got two-row SUVs. One is a crossover, the other one is a station wagon. They're both very capable, all-wheel drive. This one's fully loaded, this one's only in the mid-tier. What do you get for around $45,000? You get a lot of capability, a lot of space, maybe not so much technology. What do I mean? Well, let's go for a drive. These two nameplates were born in the 1990s and they're still with us today. The Outback is in its 6th generation and it's new since 2020 and it got a small refresh for 2023. The Honda Passport in this generation is new since 2019 and Honda's hardly done anything to it since. Honda may have an off-road trim, but the Outback already comes that way on every trim. It's 8.7 inches off the ground, and while the approach and departure angles for going off-road are not as good as the Passports, for most people this is going to be more helpful because not only do you get up to 3,500 pounds of towing, that is less than the Passports, the roof, it's lower, and you get integrated cross rails so it's easier to mount things and you don't have to take them on and off. They stay there. Now Subaru is very conservative. It uses 17 and 18-inch wheels. This is the Touring, so it does have the 18s, but that's about as fancy as you're getting. Nice LED taillights, LED headlights, all the usual features, all the body cladding. It's very recognizable as an Outback because, well, what else has it been for the last 30 years? It's a lifted station wagon and it's proud to be that way. The Outback looks like a traditional station wagon and the Passport, it's a traditional SUV. It's tall, it's boxy, the doors are flat, the windows are very large. And the tires are chunky on this Trail Sport model because it's meant to be the off-road trim. These are General Grabber ATs, they're all-terrain tires, but it doesn't actually alter the ride height. It's lower, in fact, than that Outback. But even though it's not truly an off-roader, I think you'll like the way this looks if you want that SUV truck feel. If you don't, and you want to drive more like a car, then it's that one. There's two very different engines on board. The Honda uses a big displacement V6 with some pretty respectable numbers, whereas on the Subaru, the optional engine here is turbocharged and it's 4 cylinders, but very, very healthy numbers. And the fuel economy, no matter which Outback you use, is way better. The Honda just doesn't cut it. Now, all-wheel drive is standard on both. There's a 9-speed automatic over here and a CVT on this side. The Passport is 3 inches longer in the wheelbase. It's 6 inches taller in overall height, and it's about 4.5 inches wider. Yet inside, not all that much larger. The Outback is 3 inches longer in overall length, and because of those extra overhangs, the approach and departure angles are not as good as this Passport. That's the real true SUV, but this one is sitting slightly taller, actually a good deal taller, 8.7 inches versus 8.1. Cargo space, the Passport wins behind the seats, 41 cubic feet versus 33. But when they're folded down, the numbers are very similar, 76 and just 78. Up front, there's a 1/2 inch less headroom with this power moonroof, but there's 2 more inches of extra legroom. The Outback may still look like Subarus have for many, many years, but it looks more modern than the Passport. The use of color, the fit and finish, it just feels more inviting inside the Outback versus the all-black cabin of that Passport. In the Outback, you sit lower like a car, even though this is sitting slightly higher off the ground. You're more cosseted, and you just have a slightly more enveloping interior, but it's just as easy to see out of. Even though the dimensions are roughly the same for headroom, it just feels a lot airier in here, and that's because the windows are so much taller. The Passport trades on simplicity. There's nothing to relearn because Honda hasn't changed anything for many years. But it's also very boring. Only the EXL trim, which is below the Trail Sport, has different colors other than black. The new changes for 2024 are the center console. It removes the flip-down armrest that you used to have for both front seats, and now it's bigger inside here, and it's a little bit flatter. There's more room for wireless charging. Compared to the Passport, there's an inch less headroom in the Outback, but would you believe it? There's equal amounts of legroom. There are a few extra features in the back of the Passport. These sliding rear seats, so if you got more cargo or you want more legroom, that's your choice. There's also big cup holders. They're right front and center right here. These shades, optional on the Outback, they're an accessory, and there's a nice little recline feature. Not as generous as in the Outback, but this is very spacious. On the back 2 lanes, it's odd to say, but the Outback feels more unwieldy than the Passport. And really it's due to the way the steering rack is configured. I don't know what's going on mechanically, but it's a lot looser. So I have to do a lot more mid-corrections in every corner, even when I'm going straight. And on this road, it I'm turning, but I don't have the greatest feeling that the car is moving with me. That's more my biggest surprise, and really the biggest demerit of the Outback in total is the steering. This should be driving more like a car, but that Passport is the one that does it. I do like the paddle shifters on this car, even though this is a CVT and the Passport is an automatic with 9 gears. This is the much better transmission because it puts you in full control, and the downshifts are extremely smooth and the engine braking is truly strong. So many times when I drive the Outback, I don't have to use the brakes when going down hills or approaching corners because the car is slowing itself down really well. And the Passport, it lurches, and that big V6, despite how large it is, doesn't provide enough engine braking. This transmission mimics 8 different ratios and does it in a really good way. The ride is just as good as the Passport's. These springs, the dampers, everything's non-adjustable. But it definitely has a bit of float. Like taking that turn, not really enjoyable. But stopping actually is. I like the brake pedal feel better than the Honda's. Not so mushy. The Outback has the superior engine. Not only is this car a few hundred pounds lighter, but the turbocharger here at 2,000 RPM, it's on the boil. This thing's moving. And that CVT, where a lot of CVTs are always pegging the revs high, here, it only does it if you use the paddle shifters, which I am right now. This is probably the best CVT that convinces me it's an automatic, and it's a better automatic in operation than that Passport's. I don't mind naturally aspirated engines, and I love V6s. Subaru used to have a 6-cylinder, but they've retired it because this smaller turbo 4 performs better in every way, in fuel efficiency, power, and torque. So I don't mind having fewer cylinders when it performs this well. On regular gas, too. You don't need to put in premium. Lord knows Subaru drivers would never do that. I will say, though, on the highway, the steering is still a bit sloppy where it doesn't give me a ton of confidence. And today, we're having a lot of crosswinds. So I'm having to adjust this wheel more than I'd like, more than I did in the Passport. It also feels a little louder in here. Part of that is due to these tall roof rails above me that you cannot take off. Wonderful to put kayaks on, but definitely causing more of a racket in everyday driving. There's also just not quite as much insulation as in that Honda, which I'm surprised about. The Outback's driver assist comes standard. That's eyesight. 2 cameras up here looking at the road ahead. This model has a 3rd camera, extra wide, helps detect pedestrians at intersections. That's nice. And it will self-steer, automatic cruise control, all that great stuff. It also has a driver attention monitor with a camera here that's looking at me to make sure I keep my eyes on the road, and it will warn you if you don't. There's a few extra features here on this Outback that you cannot get on the Passport. The Passport takes a little while to get going. The throttle pedal is lazy, and so is the engine. And so is the transmission. You really got to put your foot in. By the time it happens, well, the moment has already passed. It also doesn't sound good. So that's a similar quality it has with the Outback. But the Outback is more muted. This one, listen to that. Can you? Oh, God. That's downshifting into 2nd gear, but conceivably, if you're going to merge onto a highway, that's what you're going to hear. Yeah, the throttle tip-in really, to me, feels like an older 4Runner or a Land Rover. Great for going off-road, except that the Passport doesn't really go off-road all that well. Wow. Yeah, that sounds positively nasty under full throttle. But once you settle down, this is a very comfortable car. I say that about a lot of cars, this one especially. The sight lines are perfect, and it really does feel like I'm driving a much older size and style SUV, like a true body-on-frame SUV. The way that the Passport used to be in the 1990s and no longer is. Because this is the slightly shorter two-row version of the Pilot, which is car-based. At speed, the Passport is notably better at tracking straight and true, where the Outback is just wavering and wobbling a little bit with the steering input, not here. It's also quieter. These are two things that I was not expecting the Passport to be better at, given that this is a taller, bigger, heavier, boxier truck. This one's the better highway driver. And it's also, as you'll find out, better on the back roads. Honda sensing comes standard on every Passport, so you get the self-centering in the lanes. Honda was really good at doing that, just as Subaru was more than a decade ago. All well and good, but it's not the latest hands-free systems that you'll see elsewhere. There's no automatic lane changes. To me, these systems are still very unfinished, so I don't mind that, but if you're looking for the latest in semi-automated driving tech, you're not going to find it in the Passport or even the Outback. The Trailsport I'm driving has all-terrains, where the previous model years of the Trailsport had all seasons. I definitely can hear more of the tire hum than before, from what I remember, but it's not too horrible, really isn't. Even though there's extra tire noise, it still feels quieter inside here on the highway than the Outback, especially because, well, those roof rails aren't here. The steering, surprisingly very accurate. Matt Smith drove this same car in a single review, so watch that one. And he said the same thing as I'm saying now. Handles well. Oddly, weirdly. I didn't expect that, especially against the Outback, which visually you would think that a lower car would handle better, but it really doesn't. And there's roll in here, but it seems like everything is more controlled and the ride doesn't suffer either. So I think Honda has struck the better balance between comfort and control. Even though it handles better, the transmission just falls apart on these back roads because it upshifts very early. So then when you want to get on the throttle again, saying going up a hill like I'm doing now, there's always a bit of a delay. And the Outback reacts a lot quicker in that regard, even though there's no gears, and this Passport has 9 of them. Frankly, I don't like any of the 9. But a great benefit, Honda's all-wheel drive system does use a torque vectoring axle, and that's something they're very good at doing. So when you pitch the Passport into a tighter turn than you've expected, the car can tighten that trajectory for you. It's a little bit of a lifesaver, and it's also fun. Passport, the brake pedal feels a bit spongier, it feels powerful, but the Outback wins on braking. The Outback might seem to have a better interface because it's a bigger screen, but it's not. Just look at these typefaces. They look cartoony. It kind of looks a bit childish and Nintendo-y to me. That might be fun if you're into games, which I am, but in a car, I don't want to be playing games. I want to see things clearly and marked properly. And Subaru really has a long way to go in terms of user interface design. However, with eyesight, it's pretty advanced and there's some extra features for 2024, including this driver focus system, which will track my eyes and also use facial recognition for user profiles. That's something Honda doesn't have. Just like Honda, Subaru uses an outsourced navigation supplier. This one is TomTom. Honda uses Garmin. And the interface is pretty good. It looks better than the actual interface that Subaru designed. And if you go into the settings, you will find lots of clearly marked menus, which is nice. So I don't like the way they look, but at least when you're parked, you can get all this at a glance. I like the analog gauges here. That's a nice classic feature. But the center display, this one, still, I don't really know what era I'm in right now, but it is not helpful. It's small, it's not really usable. There's lots of icons everywhere that are difficult to see. And even their lane departure warning, because it's off, it's constantly on, making it seem like there's something wrong with the car. There's some changes here that Subaru needs to make that they definitely haven't done in a long time. The Passport has a better interface on a smaller screen. This one's only 8 inches, but it's color-coded, the typefaces look crisper, everything about it is just easier to use, including the Garmin navigation, and there's wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, just like in the Outback. Very easy to adjust settings. It's just so much faster and simpler, even though there's not as much real estate here. I do wish, though, that there was actual external seat controls that's only on the steering wheel. And really, I don't like these touch-sensitive buttons, but that's really the only bad thing I can say about this. The Passport also has a dated-looking instrument panel, but this one looks straight out of the DVD VCR combo era, and its technology really is just as dated. Check this out. And yes, you can see all-wheel drive torque, a few other things like turn-by-turn directions, but this is not a good system, especially when Honda is using an updated version in the new 2024 Ridgeline. This one is not acceptable. The Outback has a much lower starting price, $28,895. There's also way more trims, 9 of them. Mine was the fully loaded Touring XT, and as tested with Destination in New England, $44,281. The Passport starts at $41,900, and there's 3 trims. Mine, the mid-tier, was the Trail Sport at $46,350 with extra charge paint and Destination. Honda also includes 2 years of included maintenance. You can't get that on the Subaru. The Outback is the clear winner. Inside, there's roughly equal amounts of cargo and passenger space. This has a more powerful and better engine. I think it looks better. The interior is nicer. It's a more car-like experience. Now, if you want that style and the ruggedness of an SUV, you can get the Passport, but it's not truly that rugged. The Outback is. And it's also better priced. The safety's better. I really can't think of a reason to buy the Passport when you have a car that's so good and so versatile as this Outback. But what do you think? Tell us in the comments and subscribe to the CarGurus YouTube channel because we've got comparison reviews like this all the time. And go to cargurus.com, find some cars. We'll see you next time.